Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to What Women Want with Judy Goss and Kristen West, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. We're back for another week of What Women Want Talk Radio. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone. And thank you for joining our show tonight. Decisions. You've made a decision to hang out with us for the next 50 minutes or so, and we are so grateful for that. I'm here with Kristen West, my co-host.
Happy Valentine's Day, Judy.
What are you waiting for, a drum roll? We don't have one yet.
Oh, wait a minute. We do. Do you hear that? I'm doing it with my hands.
I'm going to have my daughter. She just started drum lessons. I'm going to have her put in a drum roll one of these days. Anyway, I've decided, Kristen, that What Women Want is the best radio show on the planet, as we've reached 1 million downloads since we first hit the airwaves. And between latalkradio.com's archives, iTunes, Google Play, and now YouTube, you can find us everywhere. So we're seeking sponsors for our show now, because if we are everywhere, then your company or service will be also, or your product, whatever you have to get out there. So email us for a complete deck through our website, whatwomenwantradio.com, and someone from our team will get right back to you. Go ahead and lock in that rate before we get the next report, and our numbers go up again, whatwomenwantradio.com. So no matter where you live, where you are, what you're doing, we are loving it. Speaking of Valentine's Day, if you're listening live this day, and we know this holiday, we know you'll enjoy our show with the most amazing guests, from celebrities in the entertainment world to world-class experts in their fields. We cover it all with our lifestyle topics that make you think, like decisions, conversation that feeds our mind and energizes our spirit. Now, I'd like to take a moment and mention the tragedy that happened today in Florida. There are no words, honestly, for what happened, and my heart and prayers go out to all the families down there and everyone involved. I have kids about to go into high school, and so many of us do, kids going to public schools, private schools, whatever it is. You know, it just sometimes feels like our world's just not safe enough anymore. So God bless everyone down there, and we're rooting for you. And it's just unfathomable, the tragedy down there. Decisions. Okay, I'm deciding what to say right now, because I was fascinated with the fact that once I decided to think about how many decisions we make in a day, I got a little obsessed with it. It's a never-ending process. So when we wake up in the morning, actually, we make a decision to get out of bed, right? We could decide to stay in bed and not do anything. We go into the bathroom, and these somewhat robotic routines really are decisions, right, Kristen?
Oh, they totally are. From the moment you wake up, you decide, whether or not you got up on the wrong side or the right side of the bed, and then you walk out of your bedroom, you decide what to eat, and then you decide what you're, or if you even eat at all, or if you, gravitate immediately towards your phone.
I feel like our reception's going in and out a little bit. Oh, maybe it's just me.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
There we go. You make decisions. You make priorities about what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, and what order you do it in, and how much attention you pay to things. It's a barrage of decisions.
I feel like we're having some technical issues, so I don't know if everyone can hear me or not. But hopefully, you know what? I'm just going to keep talking, and we'll make the best of it. Okay. Kristen, just message me and let me know that you can hear me, because that means everyone else can hear me also. So besides being the host of this awesome show for the past 3 years, my background originally came from the fashion and publishing worlds. I was a high fashion model with Ford New York, which was very fun and very glamorous, before becoming a magazine editor. And then that led me to hosting and reporting for Better TV, and a show called City Buzz, and a few other shows in the past few years. And now I'm a regular contributor on NBC and Fox. I founded the company What Women Want Networking 7 years ago. We're nationwide with several regional chapters, and hosting our second national conference in October in Atlanta. And I'm also a St. Martin's Press author and the mom of teenage twin girls. Kristen, I can't hear you, but hopefully everyone else can. Tell us about your On Fire award-winning acting, award-winning producing, and award-winning screenwriting career. It's just unbelievable.
Well, Judy, I can hear you, so I'm not sure what's going on, but we're gonna trudge right through it. I've been having a blast, actually. The Lich is now in post-production. It's going to be out of post-production soon, and I've also have.
I hope that Kristen's talking because I can't hear her.
I can't.
Maybe it's my reception.
I can totally hear you, Judy, but I'm having a wonderful time doing all of that, and I'm on Up Live 4 days a week. And it's been tremendous. I've actually been doing live streaming news as well on the Up Live broadcast, and of course, coming here every Wednesday on What Women Want Talk Radio. It's been really fun for me as well to keep abreast of what's going on, and I'm so excited because we're going to catch up with Jane Bishop in just a few minutes as well. And she, I met her at the conference. The conference was just so wonderful. And, she's just like, Judy and I were talking before the show, and we both agreed Jane is a bright ray of sunshine. You cannot get better and more fascinating than Jane. I guarantee you, if you're not having the best Valentine's Day ever, Jane is going to make it all right. And on that note, Jane Bishop, I'd love to introduce her. She invests in people. She's a credentialed professional business coach, published author, and speaker who founded Take the Next Step out of her passion to help others go for their it. She is known as someone who lives forward, and her passion for life and encouraging others is evident, whether it's chatting with a friend over a cup of coffee, brainstorming with a leadership team, or addressing hundreds of professionals from a platform. She is very authentic, very enthusiastic, and she has an innate desire to keep it all about other people, and that provides the foundation for a captivating experience with Jane. Welcome to the show, Jane. Welcome back.
Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you for having me.
Girls, I made the decision to come back to the show.
Yes, you did, and I'm so thrilled because we just introduced Jane and we just got her on.
And Kristen, I think you and Judy had this planned because we're talking about decisions and emotional IQ and how every emotion has a person.
It's
has
true.
A purpose with our person. So I'm not going to ask either one of you what emotions you are experiencing at this moment.
Oh, you should.
I couldn't hear anybody, so I'm just kind of like checking all my connections and kind of just, going on with that. But Jane, welcome back. And I want to, thank you, first of all, on air and in front of everyone, because you are so supportive in every single way. With the radio show, with, our networking company, and with the members of What Women Want, with Kristen, and you're just everywhere all the time, always supporting us. And I just want to give you a big thank you right now for all of that before we even start the interview.
Well, thank you, Judy. I believe in supporting things that I believe in, so I'm glad to do it.
So you have a way of turning people's perspectives around. We've had many conversations. I just think it's phenomenal how you think and how it rolls out of your mouth when you do. And I'm sure you'll do this again as we're speaking on the show. Tell us exactly, let's start with what you do, and then we're going to go into decisions and how to make them and the emotional intelligence that falls behind those decisions.
Sure. Well, thank you, Judy. I'll just kind of add a couple of lines to Kristen, thank you very much. I basically, as an investor in people, I really, through my, as a business and life coach, work one-on-one with clients and help them shift their perspective, help them have a turnaround sometimes. A client recently told me, said, Jane, you're a turnaround specialist. And it's simply helping others get some clarity when they're stuck, which then empowers them to have confidence, and then they can live their life forward in a more fulfilling manner. And there are multiple tools in my portfolio. I do training and do speaking in terms of trying to connect and just encourage people to take a moment to consider where they are, maybe from a slightly different perspective. And when we change perspective, we can often get a different insight to what we're dealing with. And our emotions drive that. And knowing how they drive it and how they impact us can help us make better decisions.
Well, totally, and I agree with that. And, I read on Thrive Global, there's a woman named, and I'm probably going to murder this name right now, Angeles Arian. She's a cultural anthropologist. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. But she said, now this is what I don't quite understand. Maybe I'm just taking it a little bit too literally, but she said if a choice lines up so that it supports health, happiness, wisdom, and love, then it's the right choice. What do you think about that?
I think if that's where your personal core values are, absolutely.
Okay, so if I make a decision that supports health, happiness, wisdom, and love, let's say it's getting out of bed in the morning, right? I wake up and I decide, you know what, I don't want to get out of bed in the morning, even though I have work and I have to take care of my kids, but it supports health, happiness, wisdom, and love because my health, my immune system goes up if I sleep more. My happiness, because I'm happier if I get more sleep. My wisdom, because it gives me rest so my brain works better. And loving myself, because I'm taking care of myself enough to go back to bed and take care of myself.
Absolutely.
Why isn't that the right choice? Yeah, but then I'm ignoring my responsibilities for work, taking care of the kids. I mean, I have, a business, a family, people depend on me. How is that the right choice? It supports all those things. I don't get it.
Well, now that's a whole different show in itself. But let me just laser focus, if I can, Judy, and answer your question.
Because I love how you take things and pull them apart and flip it around and say, Judy, come on.
Yeah. So, Judy, how can you be the best mom? How can you be the most effective at work? How can you be the best influence around your community if you are not aligning with all of those values that you noticed first?
Well, I am aligning with all the values because there's a definition for each one, right? I'm healthy, happy,
Exactly.
learning, and loving myself if I just sleep a little more. But I feel like that, there's a backlash to that.
Well, in your mind, perhaps, and a lot of people do this, sometimes we put value on our feelings. And feelings, our emotions, really, every emotion has a purpose. They're meant to inform us. They're meant to tell us about opportunities and threats. They are intended to tell us how to make wise choices. And so I would ask the question of you or anyone listening who's going through that same thing, what is it that you are limiting yourself about because you are creating the guilt by aligning with those core values, and yet you think, oh, my emotions, I'm leaving all this other undone.
Oh, because it's not a full alignment then if there's something that I'm thinking that's making me feel guilty or bad about it.
Exactly.
Light bulb.
Light bulb. See, if we treat our feelings as neutral, and I realize that's hard to do, but if we try to do that and think of it as a research and put no good, the word good or bad on them, and treat them as data, what are they telling you?
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think we also overthink a lot of things,
Yes.
which I do, and we go nitpick and get in, into all the details, and our mind just, implodes with all of the information, especially what's going on out there now with the social media and everything that we, that's available to us to read and absorb. And okay, so I would love to enlighten our listeners about emotional intelligence and how it affects our lives. You and I have had some terrific conversations about this.
Yes, we have. Well, I think I like to, as you and I have talked recently, people hear emotional intelligence and they think, oh, I'll touchy-feely and a little sappy and a little syrupy. Some people do think that to the extreme, and they don't understand what that is. And I think it's helpful just to set the context that it's really, when we're talking about emotional intelligence, it's really the ability to recognize our emotions, what's going on inside of us, understand them, and then see how they affect those around you. And once we do that, then we can understand our response to people, and we can also understand other people's emotions. How I would imagine that if I said to you, think of a time when your blood pressure shot up and your frustration level and your stress level shot up, and what was behind all that. I would imagine you could think of something.
Mm-hmm.
Even
The emotional and
yes.
the emotional, it starts with your thoughts and then it goes to the physicality
Right.
of
Right.
the reaction.
And so and every emotion affects us physically. Every emotion affects us physically. So in that setting, in that moment, think of a time when you weren't as aware and recognized those emotions, and perhaps you responded or reacted in a way that was harmful or inappropriate or out of alignment with who Judy is.
Mm-hmm. Like the fight or flight syndrome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if you've got something in your mind, then contrast that with another time when you are very aware of your emotions and you understand what's going on inside of you, so you know how to respond, you know how to manage your emotions so that you can be effectively responding to the person or persons around you.
So what's one of the biggest things that I can do to help me make that decision? I'm sorry, we're having a little technical issues in the background. What is one of the biggest things I can do to kind of tease that decision apart and step away and make a logical decision if my emotions are getting in the way?
Sure. One thing is get to know your emotions. Get to know Judy's emotions. Put a name to it. Someone has said, name it, and then you can tame it. And once you get to know it and can identify it, and I'm talking about emotions beyond the basic emotions. We tend to think joy, trust, surprise, anger, disgust, but there are deeper emotions. So name it, recognize it. And then the second thing, begin to get to know your emotions and what triggers them, what sets those off. And when you do that, the third thing is stop, shift, make a physical shift. If you're sitting, stand up. If you're in a room, shift your feet, but make some physical bodily shift and then respond.
See, this is why you're so good at what you do. Because you take it step by step and you make it so that, you're talking to someone who doesn't feel like they're back in kindergarten, but you're making it simple enough for us to realize that these are the steps that we have to take. Now, does this have to do with when people tell me, just go take a walk and just get some air? Is that what you're talking about?
That would be something, yes. That sometimes you need a little bit longer to walk away from the situation. Case in point, several years ago, I was in a work setting, and there were a group of us sitting around a table, and they were making some significant changes in the company that I was in, and all of us around the table, except myself, got a job offer to stay with that company.
Oh, my gosh.
Somebody else in the company that was not as highly skilled, in my humble opinion, as I was, got a job offer. And when I found that out, Judy, I immediately knew what was going on inside of me. I mean, there was a rush. And I simply got up, walked out of the room, closed the door, and walked down the hall to the restroom. Because now, if I had not been in tune and aware of my emotions, named it, and knew what was going on and why it was going on, I probably would have exploded. And I'm not an exploding person. Unless you
No,
mess
you're
with my
not.
family.
That's for sure.
Unless you mess with my family, and then and so that's what I'm talking about. Get to know your emotions, get to know what's going on, and then take action. And sometimes it is that drastic. You walk away, and then you come back, or you use that SSR method. You stop, you shift, and then you respond.
Mm-hmm. I used to walk away from a guy that I was dating. I don't think he took it very well when we got into an argument. But I think I was storming up instead of walking away calmly and trying to make a decision. So, you know what? We had a poll that we posted.
Yeah.
And we asked people, what would you do if you have to make a big decision? What are the two things? Listening to other people's input or writing down pros and cons would you choose in making a decision? And I was surprised to see that 60% of the answers chose other people's input. For me, writing down the pros and cons just kind of maps it out a little more clear, and I can sit there and stare at what I wrote, and sometimes what I wrote moves on to, other things that make it give me more clarity. But listening to other people's input, I think, can be dangerous in a way if you give it too much weight. How do we kind of, weigh that out and balance out what other people are saying with what, we really want or maybe we think we should do?
Yeah. Well, you're spot on, Judy, because there are some people that do put too much weight on what other people say for a variety of reasons. I think when we're trying to make a major decision, we want to get all the research that's helpful for us. And I'm using research as listening to other people, writing down pros and cons list, doing some investigative, if it's a job change, for instance, about a company. But one thing to keep in mind is then bring it back. Then you take all of that information and you think about who you are and where you are and what data, what information lines up with the core of you. And a lot of time, one of the characteristics of emotional intelligence is motivation. And somebody with good emotional intelligence that's very high, they will be willing to put off a short-term reward in exchange for a long-term success. And
say that again.
When you've got a good healthy emotional intelligence, there's a characteristic. One of the 5 characteristics of emotional intelligence is motivation, and that means that you are willing to put off a short-term reward in exchange for a long-term success. In other words, something may look really good right now in terms of a decision, but where will that decision lead you in 6 months or 3 months?
Right, because people can be shy. And this is where I think the emotions come in. Sometimes the emotions can totally trump any kind of logic, right? That you're using in making a decision. You have to be careful. It sounds like you have to be really careful of that.
Well, you do, and I don't want to get really technical or scientific, but let me say it this way. If you imagine the base of your brain, in our neck, everything that we think, see, feel, etc., enters our brain through the brainstem. And it really, what you want to do, you want it to travel through all of the neural pathways and everything in our brain and arrive at the front part of the brain, the forehead, if you want to think of it that way, because that's where our logic center lies. That's where we make those wise decisions. But in the middle of the brain is where the emotions have to pass through. When we're not really in tune with our emotions, they just kind of sit in the middle of the brain and they camp out and they set up house. And then we just get nowhere. It's called the amygdala hijack.
Wow.
And you're just going to stop there?
Wow.
Tell me more. Come on, Jade. This is absorbing into my amygdala Yeah, in down into the medulla and my cortex.
Yeah.
I think that's working in my head right now. It's all coming together. So keep going. I love this.
Yeah. and so what we do is they just kind of sit there and set up shop, set up camp, set up house. And when they're there, we don't validate them, we don't name them, we don't use them to inform us. We kind of go blindly around, and it could be something as, oh, this sounds really great, and I don't like where I am, so let me go over there. And we jump without thinking through because we're in that emotional state of not recognizing what our emotions are telling us. And that leads us to decisions sometimes that are not the best decisions.
Decisions that we regret.
Exactly. But now, on the opposite side of that, we can let our emotions stay camped out there in the limbic system with that amygdala hijack, but then it's okay for a moment. Just don't let them set up shop. Don't let them set up house.
Right.
Acknowledge them. That's where the emotional intelligence comes in. You acknowledge it, you name it, you think about what is this telling me, and then you let it pass on through to the front part of the brain where you make that wise decision. Our decisions are still not going to be perfect, but they will be more informed,
right,
and better for us, in the long run.
It sounds like emotional intelligence is really an umbrella for getting control of your emotions. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Excellent. I love that because I think that you're right. I mean, when we just kind of run down the road and start deciding all of these things with our emotions, then it just doesn't become logical sometimes what we're doing. Right. So we really have to sit down and be a little more analytical, I think, about what we're doing.
I think you're right, Judy. And then part of that, in recognizing it and becoming aware of that, I mean, obviously that's the huge first step. If nobody ever does anything but get in touch and recognize and acknowledge and name their own emotions, then you begin to understand how your emotions are affecting those around you. You're beginning to understand other people and their emotions and their behavior so that you can better relate to them and engage with them. Because your business is built on relationships, is it not?
Absolutely. Everyone's is.
Everyone's is. So why not work on and strengthen your emotional intelligence if that's impacting your decisions so that you can have better relationships in your business and your family and your friends and your community?
Makes perfect sense. And I love how you take these complicated, difficult to kind of absorb, normally and conversations and topics and just take them around and give us simple steps and wrap it up neatly in a bow. It's so perfect.
Well,
and go ahead.
I just think the basics, we get away from the basics sometimes. And if we don't have the basics, then we have a shaky foundation.
Absolutely. Well said. Now, where can people get a hold of you, Jane?
They can get a hold of me at my website, which is www.takethenextstepcct.com, or they can call me, 404-432-2701. I do answer my phone if I'm not tied up with a client.
Amazing. Someone who answers their phone. I love it.
I answer my phone, yes. I do. I enjoy that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and all of the light bulbs that you've turned on, and I'm sure many listeners' heads. Happy Valentine's Day, and
thank you, and happy Valentine's Day, and happy decoding your emotions.
There you go. I love it. Thank you so much, Jane. I want to give a shout out to entertainment lawyer Sue Basco. She's really amazing. She's out there for all of your individual entertainment needs, whether you're an actor or you're a director or a producer or somehow involved in the entertainment industry. She is absolutely superb. She's fast, she's quick, and you can just Google her name, Sue Basco, SUEB as in boy, ASKO. She's just fantastic. So I just wanted to give a shout out to her. Thank you, Sue, for supporting us here at What Women Want. And Kristen, would you like to bring on Reverend Patricia Cagganello?
Yes, Reverend Patricia Cagganello is CEO and founder of Sacred Stories Media, an online media network for the conscious voices of today. Sacred Stories Media is comprised of a book publishing and marketing company, podcasting, a telesummit series, The Owl, an online magazine, and their dynamic online learning division, Sacred You. Welcome to the show, Reverend Patricia.
Thank you, Kristen. Hi, Judy. It's great to be here.
We're so excited to have you back, Reverend Patricia, and happy Valentine's Day to you as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, you're a person that deals and cares for people spiritually, and I'm sure you have a lot of stories and anecdotes. But I want to take a dive into you because and we'll get to your anecdotes in a minute. But have you ever had a difficult decision that you've had to make that you were kind of on the fence about?
Which day or what part of every day are you talking about? So yeah, absolutely.
Like yesterday?
Like yesterday, today, pretty much. Yeah. No, I think we have. I don't know if sometimes they're difficult. Of course, I think if there's maybe larger issues we're weighing or potentials that we think may happen. But I think what happens more every day, at least for me, is that I need to it's interesting, I was listening, to the earlier part of the show, and there's a lot about emotional intelligence, and I have to get a lot of times out of my emotions in order to make what I consider conscious or clear decisions. So it's an interesting balance. I find myself in that position more than anything, is to clear my emotions.
Do you think that it's better to go with our gut, or do you think we need to take more space with our decisions?
I think it's really super important that we kind of get out of our own head and we stop taking things so incredibly personally or making them so personal. And I think we take a step back and maybe a broader view or perspective, at least consider the impact that our decisions may have, not only on ourselves, but our, Judy had mentioned family members earlier, our community, our country, the world, our environment. I think it's super important that there's a greater focus and maybe more awareness that's being brought to not only the decisions, how they impact us, but the ripple effect of the impact of our decisions on others.
I'm interested in that idea of the ripple effect very much, and I think you have a unique perspective because you are an interfaith and interspiritual minister. So I'm wondering, from your spiritual perspective, how much free will do we have? How much fate do we have? Is it synchronicity? How much of the reality of our decisions do we really have control over?
That's such an awesome question, Kristen. Thank you so much for bringing the conversation in this direction, because I think a lot of that is sometimes misunderstood. So my understanding, or the resonance that I have with that, what really mentioned gut before, right? What feels true to me, what my experience has always been, and I think that's where our real knowing is, when we tune into our heart space, so we tune into how that really feels in our body. And I absolutely believe we always have free will, but the idea of free will versus fate, and how much can we really impact that? What I know to be true is that we have multiple options, right? So it's not so much about fate being the one end determinant position we get to, or place we get to in our life. I believe that we came to have experiences types of experiences, who we have them with, what type of job we have to get there, whether they're always joyful or maybe they're a little bit more difficult, we can take many paths. They're all fine, they're all right, and ultimately we'll get to the experience that we came to have.
I like that idea. And for me personally, I liken it to the old school choose your own adventure books, where you get to choose what you do next at the end of each chapter, or a little bit more postmodern reference, a multiple user dungeon, one of those fantasy reality games you play on the internet where you're living in a mythical kingdom and you get to choose, your role in the kingdom and what family you're part of. I think of it as sort of like those types of experiences. But I think one of the things people do struggle with is that notion that, how much responsibility do you take for what happens to you? And I'm sure that you see that in ministry. Now, I know also from your background, you were a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. And, one of the things with that, I imagine, is that you would often have to deal with the effects of others' decisions, both good and bad, in the chain of command. And I want to get your perspective. If a decision had been made that affected you and you didn't like or agree with it, how do you deal with that? When someone's decision that affects you, but you don't really have a lot of say in how that goes?
Wow, I absolutely love speaking with you. That's such a phenomenal perspective. And so I was in the Marines from 18 to 24, and my maturity level in that time of my life compared to now, I would hope is vastly different. I would hope that I've matured, somewhat. When I was 18 to 24 and in the Marine Corps, you really didn't have much choice but to just follow the orders, right? And part of the construct of the military or that type of a system is to engender humility and to engender obedience, right? And so things are done and decisions are made in order to almost train you to just follow orders, right? And so it's really swallowing your pride in a lot of ways, and in many ways believing that there is a higher good or a higher purpose that you're serving in showing up and following orders. Completely different type of an environment. But if we take that idea, though, that even today maybe, and you're in a workplace or something, and you have to follow orders or follow direction, and maybe you don't believe in them, maybe from your employer, it creates situations that we have choices in how to respond. And I think that goes back to exactly what we were mentioning before, the idea of a conscious decision, or how our decisions impact others. And so in that instance, what I would suggest is that we try to take ourselves out of the situation. We try to not to take things as personally as we seem to do when we first show up, and take that longer view of what are the impacts on myself, my company, my coworkers, my family, and so forth, in the decisions I'm making or the decisions I'm following.
Fascinating.
But if
stuff.
you were talking about your emotions, and this is Judy, by the way, talking, and I just want to, sometimes we get so wrapped up in our emotions. I mean, and I'm taking it to an extreme here, but if someone you love passes away, that type of thing, that we can't step outside ourselves necessarily, and we can't see, the trees through the woods. So what step do we take then? How do we, get ourselves out of that, or at least take a step forward through that to get us to making the right decision eventually?
I think it's really super important that we're also kind to ourselves and gentle with ourselves. I think this world can sometimes be a very difficult place. And
that's why sometimes I don't get out of bed for a few hours.
And I think that's okay. I think that's an honoring of yourself and how you're feeling that day. And to the point, I just want to mention, you were mentioning before, and I know you have 2 teenage daughters, and sometimes, we feel responsibility towards others, and which as parents we should, of course, but the emotion of how will this affect my kids, or what will happen, or what will they think if I choose this or that, I think it's really super important that we're not only honoring ourselves, but that we're able to find that balance and know at the same time that it's okay if I stay in bed a couple hours, but hey, you know what? Maybe it's okay, and today maybe I need to kind of get out of my own head. I tell myself all the time, stop feeling sorry for yourself, and not in a way that it is unkind, even though it kind of sounded that way when I just said that, but it's an awareness of sometimes taking things a little more personally. And so then what do? Then I go out into public. I engage with people. I have conversations with people. Because working from home sometimes, you can also get a little bit too wrapped up in the emotion or the drama of what you think is happening, when in reality, if you just go take a walk to Jane's point earlier, or you just have some conversations with some other people, it kind of just puts you in a different frame of mind, and you get less involved in your own drama.
That's for sure. You can sit at home and just get incredibly wrapped up within your head and start overthinking, like I was mentioning earlier, and just, one thing leads to the other, and it starts spinning out of control. And I guess a way to take that step back really is to sometimes physically remove yourself from it, right?
Yeah. And the other way that I try to recenter to, and it was interesting, back to Kristen's earlier point, is the idea, when we're talking about fate versus decisions, or, choosing our paths and what we're doing, seeing ourselves as part of the larger community, right? Being conscious that what we do not only impacts ourselves but impacts others. I think if we can try to come from that perspective, that we are part of a larger community, or we choose to be part of a larger community, there's a consciousness that we can bring to our decisions, our thought processes in making the decisions, that can help us come out of that personal emotional drama that we might be drawn to.
Talking about making conscious decisions, Kristen, I know that you're in an industry that, everything you do affects other people. And I can imagine the emotions are very, very high when you're on set. And I can't just imagine. I mean, I've been there before. So how do you play your role and do what you have to do when you're standing in front of all the cameras and all of those people, when a certain move is going to affect people in a certain way, especially if you flub a line or show the wrong emotion, or you're trying to play off someone else that isn't, you aren't able to. How do you kind of get that into control? Is there anything particular you do?
I like to think of it all as a big game. In all honesty. Well, no, because here's the thing, is that if you play a drama too dramatic, it's going to be tinny. If you play a comedy too, if you go for the laugh instead of going for what the truth is of a situation, it's not going to actually be funny. And I think one thing that Jane has pointed to, both now and in broadcast past, and what I'm hearing Patricia say, is that sometimes
Kristen, I think you're fading out on us a little bit there.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Technical issues. Yeah, that's better.
I am right up on this mic. See the game. See, we're playing. Can we hear me? Can you hear me now? No, but
gosh, it's a little fuzzy in and out.
I'm sorry.
What's going on? Okay.
I'm sorry about that. Well, I think we have to get into the idea that this is a game, in the sense that we can be playful and
Patricia,
authentic.
can you hear her? Because I'm wondering if it's just me. Okay.
Yeah,
so
I can't hear her either.
What's going on there at the studio at the moment. But you know what? Let's just keep talking about this with ourselves, because I feel bad for Kristen, but she seems to be fading away at the moment. So what can we do in a situation like that? Now, I know that, you are a counselor, and you've been involved in situations like this, I'm sure, even in your everyday work that you do with Sacred Stories. What's your advice when somebody's in the middle of a situation where they know something they do is going to impact, someone that is either physically near them or, someone that they're working with, but they still want to be themselves and they still want to express themselves? What would you say to them?
Well, I think that's kind of an interesting question to answer. I think that it's a difficult question too, because there's so many variables there, right? So if we're saying that we are making decisions in our own best interests, regardless of the impact it would have on other people, then I would say that I would ask someone to reconsider their decision, right? Because I believe that it's very important that we do show up in relationship, right, in conscious relationship with others, and it's not all about us, and it's not, the first one to the finish line. And to Kristen's point, what she was speaking about a moment ago, that sometimes she just views some of these larger dynamics as, a game, I think is a really powerful way to show up in the world, because I think what it allows us to do is not take things where we don't care what we're doing, but allows us to come from things from a higher perspective, because we're not so caught up in the emotion of every decision, right? So if we realize that we're here for a greater purpose, or we realize that our lives are encompass so much more than maybe the decision at hand, then we don't have to be almost frozen with indecision or tied up in the emotion of the decision, right? When I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed by something, I like to take the larger perspective and say, hey, I came here for a much greater reason. There's a lot more going on than this one thing. Like, I can totally handle this, and when I can feel less overwhelmed by something, then I can bring clarity and much better decision-making processes to it. So I think the first thing would be to try to take that approach, to reduce the overwhelm or the emotion you may feel by something, and to also maybe, try to gauge again when you're in relationship with others, if you're really considering the impact that your decisions will have on others, not only those right within your, your business decision, let's say, or who you're working with, but really the additional impact of how that rolls out. We train businesses in making conscious decisions, and there's a much larger field of impact than just the business unit. And part of making the decisions, and I think it applies to personal decisions and business decisions the same, is to really take into consideration that ripple effect, that I mentioned earlier.
Totally. And I think this comes back around to, you saying to not take things so personally. And what Kristen was basically saying is don't take yourself so serious, before she faded out. I think that's what she was trying to tell us, is to just kind of, she was saying that, I pretend I'm playing a game. Well, you know what? That is stepping back and taking yourself a little less seriously. Mm-hmm. But we have about a minute left, and I want to make sure that we get in your website and where to find you and, what you would like to say about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is sacredstoriesmedia.com, and from there we have all the links to the other sites, the publishing, the online learning, the magazine, the podcasting, as Kristen so nicely mentioned earlier. But sacredstoriesmedia.com is definitely the place to start.
And you're just doing so much, with empowering women and men, I'm sure, and the influence that you have on people and your positivity. I admire it. So thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this time with us.
Thank you, Judy. I always love to speak with you. And Kristen, thank you also. It was our first conversation, but I have to say your questions are awesome, and enjoyed the conversation. So thank you for having me on.
Kristen is amazing, but she's been cut off the show. So we're going to bring her on back next week when we can get our tech difficulties ironed out. But thank you so much again, Reverend Patricia. We appreciate it. And next week, Dr. Nina Savell from Win the Diet War, and Tyrone Barrington, legendary modeling agent, and now he's a top dog casting director for L'Oreal, Target, Avon, all these top companies. And they're going to talk about the modeling industry and the impact that it's had on mental health. So remember, subscribe to us on YouTube. Don't miss even one show. Go to whatwomenwantradio.com for more, and we'll see you next week. Good night.
You're listening to What Women Want with Judy Goss and Kristen West, only on LA Talk Radio.